by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we sell.
Wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. GM. Today is Thursday, 25th of July. And I want to start with something. I've just watched this morning.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space,
Obviously not going to watch the whole
surrounded
thing.
by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington
Right,
showed us
you can see it
presidents
here
are not kings.
in full quality.
Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice.
Blah, blah, blah. Right? So, what's most important about that is Biden's alive. But it's a good example of how people who take on an opinion feel the need to double down and confirm their bias. And it's really applicable to you as a trader. So people who are more conspiratorial and I'm not exactly against conspiracies. I like to consider all possibilities. I believe that most conspiracies over time turn out to have a bit of truth in them. But also, a lot of stuff is just not true. So one of the things that's not true is that Biden is dead, and that's a deep fake AI 11-minute super high definition quality video with Biden speaking the way Biden speaks, making mistakes, all of that, right? It's far more likely that Biden had a problem, maybe had a medical emergency, and he's all right now, but they're forcing him to step down anyway, and they can put enough drugs in him where he can do a pre-recorded speech. So, I don't care about Biden, right? But when you think about whenever something happens and you want to, in a trade, when you're long Bitcoin or you're long a coin and the market starts to give you conflicting signals that might tell you should probably exit, and then you keep looking for stuff that would prove that no, I should still be long, that is the exact same mindset as people who keep doubling down on a conspiracy online. People who won't admit that, yes, he's alive. Maybe everything isn't fucking deepfake, AI generated clones. But they're still going on with it, right? It's and part of it's for engagement, part of it's for saving face. It's ego. So be mindful of that. As a trader, and I mean, I'm not anywhere near as neutral as I should be. I very much lean conservative. I'm not American, it doesn't matter, but I feel like the principles of what you see on the right at the moment, except for all the wars and all that bullshit, the principles what you see on the right would be probably more what I would align with. I think everyone here is probably similar. Just something, normality, a man's a man, a woman's a woman, believing in family, right? Believing in God. But with that, one of the things that's really important as a trader is to be as unbiased as possible. You might want Trump to win the election, but as a trader, you have to consider what happens if Trump wins, what happens if Kamala wins, what happens if something else in between happens. You have to consider all eventualities. Some of the best traders I know are apolitical, meaning they don't have a political affiliation. And I don't have a political affiliation. Again, like I said, I don't live in America. And in Europe, I mean, left and right are just two sides of the same coin. There's no fucking difference. So it's easy in Europe to be apolitical. There is nobody. But in America, everyone's bucketed into these left-right. And then because the world is global, even us in Europe or wherever you are, you still kind of follow the US system, right? The US is the global superpower for a reason. Cultural superpower as well, right? The US has exported their culture all over the world. So remember that you need to stay neutral in terms of your trading decisions. If, for example, if Trump doesn't win the election, are you going to continue trading crypto the same way? Because you shouldn't. Kamala Harris has locked up. She's a prosecutor, remember. She has charged and prosecuted and locked up people involved in just trying to build open, decentralized companies in America. She's super anti-crypto, more than Biden, because she's actually done stuff. Like, she's actually been on the prosecutor side and overseen it, and all accounts are that she hates crypto. So if she does win the presidency, you can't just be like, oh yeah, to the moon. No, you have to change your opinion. So the time to make those plans and map out those different futures is right now. And all I'm just imploring is that you stay neutral. Stay neutral in your decision making. You can want one candidate or the other to win, but you can't invest or trade based on what you want. You have to be ruthlessly objective and just see the charts. So where are we at right now? Bitcoin looks fine. I mean, if it's going to do the path I talked about, where I mentioned it over here, it should pull back into this area. Good. Should stay like that, and then we go higher. Right? Now it's pulled back in here. I mentioned the day this pushed up. You don't want to see it like drop straight back. I would say 4 days to pull back after 3 days to rally is pretty good. That's pretty solid in terms of a reversion. It's not as if it tried to go up and just immediately fell back and wasn't able to sustain. Now, it's also not as low volatile as these, and it's certainly not as bullish as this, either of these setups. I don't think we have one of those setups. I think we still have a lot of risk, and it's now right on the cusp where if Bitcoin falls below there, right? If Bitcoin falls below one more time, then, all of that is off. All bets are off. If Bitcoin loses this 63 and a half level, it's probably, obviously it can bounce, but it's probably then going to go and have to form some kind of a higher low back around the 60k area, will be my guess. And you just don't want to see that. From a perspective of a bullish market moving higher, you don't want to see that. Now, Bitcoin conference is starting. You got GDP numbers today. I'll go over those on Trade of the Day. I'll discuss yesterday's Trade of the Day and then today's, because this week we've got a lot of good data. We had the PMIs, we've got GDP, and tomorrow we've got inflation, PC, sorry. But yeah, I mean, when you zoom in, what we've done is just fill in that gap. So I mentioned this. When you get these moves up, the first thing you should be looking at after you have a move up like that leaves a gap behind is you're looking for weakness in the trend. So we had a push, and then it weakened over here, broke down, retested, down we go, fill the gap. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. All you want to see now as a bull for BTC is that it stays around here. Stays around there, then it'll pop back up, and then away we go. It will get choppy, and it should get choppy, and hopefully it does get choppy around this area, because as you can see in these kind of reaccumulation parts, it can be long, it can be so it can be lengthy and low volatility, like this one, where it just squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and was very, very slow and barely moved. Or this one a little bit more volatile, where it's sweeping both sides, moving up and down, and then eventually squeezes, and then we get a catalyst that pushes higher. I don't know if that's going to happen. The way I'm looking at it here, I think probably the market wants to go a little bit lower, and a good thing to look at here would be the 4-hour trend. So this is something that's important to keep an eye on, because you might feel like yesterday we had a shift, and obviously yesterday we had the biggest red day on the Nasdaq and the S&P for I think 2 years or more in a single session. It was like 3% down on the Nasdaq, 2% down on the S&P. Huge red days. And I talked about this. So how long have I banged on about this for? It must be 6 months now. Maybe slightly less. It must be 3 or 4 months. About the summer before an election, pullbacks tend to happen, right? Said it over and over and over again, that when you go to 2020, you see that area in the middle, chop before the election. You go to 2016, here's the summer, chop before the election. And they always go higher after November. So after the November election. That's not saying it will go higher this year, but I would say it's fairly likely that we see some sideways chop until November. And if history is any guide, once the election's out of the way and there's less uncertainty, the market tends to push a bit more. And even if it's just, that might, in other markets, in other years, that kind of sideways until November has then catalyzed the market to go on its next big run. And maybe it'll do that this time. Or maybe it'll just be the catalyst to have the run up as the election's out of the way, and then that's it. Right? And that's our top. So either way, I see a post-election rally most importantly, if we do this until the election, I see a post-election rally, just as the market wants to blow off some steam and the uncertainty's out of the way and we at least know who's going to be president. But back over to Bitcoin. So looking at the 4-hour trend, which we'll zoom in on here. If you're looking at the 4-hour trend, it has been reclaimed and the 4-hour trend is bullish. So when it goes through all the hassle, all the trouble of actually moving up and staying above long enough, this is one of the ways you measure consolidation, by the way. Bitcoin moved back above the bands initially, right? So that initial rally that broke structure, that was your first bullish shift. But the bands were still bearish. It then has spent enough time, over a week, up above that area for the bands to cross. So you get a 50, above 100, above a 200. Now, we're dropping back down towards the low end, but that's totally normal. Right, you can see this at any reaccumulation phase where initially the bands go back to bullish like they did over here, right? And then prices drop below them. And it looks like it's flipping bearish again, but it's just a higher low forming, and then up it goes. And you see this over and over and over. Whenever you see the initial first cross of the bands, like they tried to cross over here, they didn't fully cross. By the time they crossed there, it was actually just done. But there's another example here of an early cross in the middle. No, these two were just first time they crossed, that was it. But you can have your reaccumulations here, right? The first time they crossed over there, 50, 100, 200, you saw a little bit of chop, and then it went higher, and so on. This is probably the thing you want to watch out for most in terms of a 4-hour reclaim. Here we had bearish 4-hour trend, big rally up, 50, 100, 200, we get into a bullish trend, but that was it, top was already in, right? Price just consolidated on the bands for a couple of weeks, and then broke down. So that could be what's happening. This could be yet another lower high forming. But when it's above the 4-hour trend, and the 4-hour trend is positive, you want to consider that this could be the start of a new uptrend, right? It's like you don't short in a bullish trend. You don't long in a bearish trend. You don't go against the trend. And until these bands would cross bearish again, which it might look like they're quite close to, but it actually takes quite a long time. Look how long it took for them to cross bullish again, right? So even after this impulse candle here on the 15th of July, when Bitcoin got above the bands, it took until the 21st. It took almost a week to actually get them fully in line, 50 above 100, above 200. So dropping down here, Bitcoin could spend several days down here and move back up, and guess what? The bands would still be fully in bullish formation because it's a 50 period look back, 100 and a 200, right? So, like especially the 200 is going to move basically sideways here. The 100 is going to move a little faster, but that's 25 days, right? The 100 EMA is like 25 days. So, or it's about 16 days, isn't it? Yeah. The 200 is about 30 days. And the 50 is about a week. So it takes time for those to have any significant changes. And if you see more consolidation around here, if you see Bitcoin failing to break significantly below that lower end, you can see wicks down into there. But if Bitcoin just holds around this area, again, dipping below the 200 is fine. It's done that before. But it would have to stay there for not long and reclaim. But by the way, out of all of that, it doesn't mean you have to get max long right now. You don't have to guess that they're going to crawl or that they're going to stay bullish. You are in a downtrend here, on the 4 hour. So initially, you've got price moving down, okay? After the move up, it's now moving down, but when you zoom it over here, it's moving sideways. So what do? Well, you look at your structure level. Where did it break down from? It broke down from there. So all the chop, all the, bouncing around and doing all this, let it do all that. If it does all that and then it reclaims 67, that is where I would consider 4 hour trend fully intact. That's the place to then get long, and you have your invalidation below the 4 hour trend. And then if that's going to start one of these big 4 hour trends that goes to all-time high and beyond, you're positioned for it. And of course, you can move your stops up as the market moves higher. Because what you're looking at here is this going to be, very simple, is this going to be a consolidation that leads to another leg higher? Now, you have to be extra careful with these because it's not a trend yet. Meaning, it's inside of a previous consolidation. So there's resistance at all points. And even though it's moving up like this, you have consolidation, move up, consolidation. If it moves up, yes, then you're trending up, trending up, trending up. But it's still within this range. It doesn't actually cleanly trend on like a daily or a weekly until it breaks the all-time high. And so it can be very, very choppy. So the best case scenario is what you see is it moves along here and then it moves above it. And then you're looking at, okay, that's consolidate, trend up, consolidate, trend up. There we go. We have a trend in progress. Even that doesn't mean that it's going to go to the moon, but it gives you the best indication. And ETH ETFs. So let's look at ETH. Big breakdown, as nobody gives a shit about ETH. Wall Street don't care, at least not yet. No surprise there. Talked about this yesterday, last few days. Yeah, another outflow day. And see those padded flows on the way in on day one, which, day one you're probably going to see some flows, disappeared immediately. But Grayscale are still selling, and down it goes. That's no surprise to anybody. If you've listened to my monthly preview, weekly previews, Bitcoin was a low day as well. That's not surprising because, what did I say? At the start, right, in the first few days, they're sellers. I talked about this with not just the Grayscale, but open interest for ETH. There was an open interest build-up, which you still have, right? Open interest has built up significantly and is still elevated from these May lows. Even there, it's still carrying 3 billion of speculative capital, a lot of which will need to roll over. And you've got same on CME for ETH. We still have 1.1 billion, which is up from 600 million. So there's still 500, 600 million of open interest build up there. And then I mentioned, of course, you've got the spot. You've got the people who bought the, Grayscale, ETH, and spot in anticipation of this run up. And it's not that ETH has to be bearish. It's not that ETH's going to zero or anything like that. It's just that they're sellers. We knew there was billions of potential selling. And we did not know where the billions of demand were going to come from on day one or day two. And the billions of demand have not arrived. And it's moved right down through that area where I said you do not want to see it move through. So ETH is bearish at this point. Until it reclaims back above that red zone, ETH would be more likely to actually now, if it starts accepting down here, which it's at risk of doing, then you're looking at possibility of a move back to the lows being higher than a possibility of going anything higher than that. Maybe ETH eventually wants to go down there. Maybe the Grayscale selling will just be enough to take it to the lows and everyone will get bearish again, and that'll be where it rises up from, which would align as well with the idea I have that September is probably the earliest that we get bullish. And I want to take it back now and think about this a little bit more like last summer, and to not get overly bearish. Just look at where it is in the context of a reaccumulation, and we'll compare ETH here to BTC of last summer, because I don't think any of this is necessarily mega bearish. But if you're looking at it from the June to August period, right? This move up into the ETH ETF could be similar to the little pop we had on Grayscale when they beat the SEC, where it's part of the bottoming process, but it's just one push, first push up gets sold into, and there's more accumulation to come. ETH comes back to the lows or comes back into this area and just chops around. What you want to see really now is this floor, right? So is this bottom on ETH the same as the Bitcoin 25k bottom? Is this bottom, this floor, is it solid? It's been defended several times already. So far you'd say, yeah, this bottom, this 2900 is rock solid. Just like 25k, kept holding all the way until the market bounced in the other direction. And you can see this here, that you had these highs, you had this resistance above, just like we have the resistance above on ETH. And price was nowhere near it, right? Price came from all the way down and it just grind up, and then blasted through. So what you're looking at next is, don't think that because the ETF didn't, I mean, we can't make the same mistake twice, can we? Can the market really be that dumb twice to think that the ETF launch matters? To think that the flows in the first week are going to tell you what the flows are going to be forever? There's no interest in Ethereum right now. But that's 2 days in on the ETF. You've also got to overcome the initial selling of Grayscale, which is always going to happen. But Grayscale only had 10 billion ETH. Already nearly 1 billion of it is gone, right? And so the market has dropped because the market was not able to absorb $1 billion of selling on ETH. But there you can see very clearly, 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday. Sorry, we're into the third day, sorry. Tuesday to Thursday. So that was the first day of ETFs, second day, and we're into the third day. That is the 1 billion roughly of ETH selling from Grayscale, plus shorter term trades. But that's what 1 billion does to ETH. Now, they're not going to sell 10 billion all at once. It's not going to be just outflows until the entire thing's gone. We saw this with Grayscale. Grayscale had 30 billion in BTC, and over the past however many months it's been, Grayscale's holdings have dropped to, well, there's a total outflow of 18 billion. So their holdings have dropped by about 65% in total. And that's over what, 6 months? So if ETHs were to drop, if half or more of all of the ETH is going to flow out from the ETFs in the next 6 months, that would be about 6 billion of outflows from Grayscale. We've almost seen 1 billion of that already. And it's not going to continue at that pace. It's going to be a steady drip, a steady selling pressure. But that will reduce. And once you get through this, we're still in July, we're still in summer, we're still in the part of the market where the big players, Wall Street, they don't trade. Right? They don't trade anywhere near the size. There's nowhere near as much volume, nowhere near as much volatility. You've got this Grayscale selling coming at a time when the market is already not as liquid as it normally would be. So it's the worst time of year for selling to be happening. And so you have to also overlay that. If this was happening in January, February, March, when the markets are more liquid, or October, November, December, when they're typically more liquid, there's more activity, there's start of year flows and end of year flows, this probably would be absorbed much easier. And no need to panic, because what did I say the other day? That's your actual big resistance. That's your actual big support. This whole shit in the middle, it doesn't matter. Anyone getting long there is an idiot anyway. Anyone getting short there is an idiot anyway, because it's easy to squeeze up, it's easy to squeeze down. So let the market play out. I think we actually need this. You look at the fear and greed that we saw. We'd gone up as high as 74, wasn't it? Yeah. Pushing towards almost extreme greed after being in extreme fear. Hopefully we do drop back a bit. Get back more to something more neutral. I think with how this chart is, this isn't a bullish chart, this isn't a bearish chart. This is quite clearly a sideways chart. So what would you say fear and greed should be? Neutral, right? It's not nuking to zero, it's not pumping to the moon. So why would it be in greed? Seems a bit out of line. So we need to see that sentiment temper down a bit. And all of this, time. That's all. That's all I can say, time, again. as always. Time. Needs time. See how we're looking once we go into August. These things take time. Is it going to go lower? It very well could. But if it does go lower, there's support below. And as for BTC, it's the same thing, right? If Bitcoin goes down, there's plenty of room for it to form a higher low. Plenty of room for people to start getting bearish again. No reasons to get bearish on a higher time frame basis. No reasons to be mega bullish either. You want to see price reacting and moving up. This absolutely can go lower. I would not be surprised at all. The market gets ahead of itself all the time. Like I said, we went from fucking complete panic to just, oh, we're so back. We're not back. We're in a range. We're consolidating. And so I think the market just got ahead of itself again, as it tends to do. Now, we'll zoom it out here and look at some of these value areas and take a look at some of this. Take off this. Try and clean this up a little bit. So you got the old May to June value area low and the May to June value area high, which is up here. That was this upper last push distribution. This is very important because the same thing happened back in May and June. We pumped up here and everyone thought, boom, that's it, breakout next. So a lot of people were buying here in anticipation of a 75, 80k breakout. We didn't get it, we broke down. So it's really important to reclaim that level because that is exactly where people were completely wrong. And so when we pushed back into it, touched the point of control, tried to reclaim the value area, couldn't. Rejected off it and retested it here yesterday. So that is a clean rejection of that area. If it cleanly rejects off that area, where are we going? Probably to the red line or the black line. You look at this higher time frame, bigger value area. And if Bitcoin goes to the value area low and holds and gets back over the POC, it's probably going to go to the value area high up there. That was the target. The target's value area high whenever the value area low gets reclaimed. But it can easily come back for a retest, which would just be a higher low form, and then move all the way to there. And even then, that doesn't mean that it's ready for moon. It's just a consolidation. This is the biggest area to focus on because Bitcoin cannot be bearish. It can't break down until it loses the value area low. Loses that value area low, down we go, right? It can't go on a moon mission until it breaks above that value area high. It has to break from that balance, and boom, away we go. So you've got your bullish high time frame, like daily chart, weekly chart. You've got your bullish, you've got your bearish paths. Everything in between is just compression, consolidation, chop. And again, we're right in the middle of that, or close to the middle of that. So it's not a place to be taking big, high time frame, bullish or bearish positions. It's just one of those areas you have to sit and wait, be patient, play the market as it comes. I'll stick with my assumption that I've had all the way along. Probably don't see anything majorly bullish until September, October, November, December. I think that's a better move into the end of the year, into the election. Maybe that gets going in August. It's clearly not going to get going in July, in my opinion. You know, we're on the 25th now, and we're probably going to see the rest of the month be more of a sideways or a little bit of downside. That will make July, almost certainly July will finish green, or at least close to green, which is another consolidative month, another failure to break down, which is good. And it just needs time, right? So patience. As a higher time frame trader, patience is your friend. GM.